Okay, I'll get started now with the introduction, and people that are coming in, they won't miss too much. We're going to start with kind of an introduction of the idea of this Potter and FireCAD integration that's was recently released, and then as we move through, you're going to see some demonstrations of the integration. My name is Bob Tata. I'm the Director of Software Services for Potter Fire Systems. And as I go through my presentation at the end, I will be handing it off to some other presenters who I'll introduce at the end of my slide deck. Okay, so the Potter and FireCAD integration, really, it all started with you. You had an idea, and we developed it. We have had many customers from the Potter side and even from the FireCAD side saying, "Hey, why don't you guys integrate your products together so that we don't have to enter our data several times? You know, once in FireCAD and again into the Potter tool and maybe in other places too." But I said, that makes a lot of sense. So, it all began with these requests and these things going on. So at NFPA 2024, the FireCAD team and the Potter team met up over at the FireCAD booth and kind of just tossed the idea around. And it didn't take long for all of us to, be nodding in the same direction and saying, this makes a lot of sense. It's something we can do. It's something that would save customers a lot of time, and it'll just make our products, both of our products, much better. And so we collaborated on a design over the last 6 to 9 months, and what you're going to see today is the result of that collaboration and the things that we've done. So the whole idea here, and you've probably seen some of the advertisements coming out on LinkedIn and so other social media, but the idea here is that we want to eliminate the dual data entry, right? We don't want to make you enter all this data in FireCAD, then do it again in the Potter programming tool, and then lo and behold, they're out of sync, or you missed something, or you missed a loop, or what have you. Want to end all that. So that was the idea here, and we do feel that we'll substantially reduce your programming time and definitely reduce any costly errors. So you'll see this feature is released in the FireCAD, the latest release of FireCAD, and it's also released in the latest version of the Potter programming tool, which is 12.3.36. If you already have the Potter programming tool, you would have been pinged recently that a new release is out, and it would request that you upgrade. If you don't have our tool, you can get that from our website. So with this integration, the panels that are supported are all of our IPA as well as our AFC panels, our ARC 100 and our PFC 4064. With this FireCAD export to the Fire Panel Programmer, what we get is the panel, the panel model, the panel name, and really kind of the big deal here is going to be the SLC point information, right? This is where, there could be hundreds, thousands of entries that you may have been doing in FireCAD that now need to get into, eventually into the Fire Panel. All of that information that you see there is being transported into our tool. And again, you'll be seeing an example of that as I go through the presentation. You're also going to be seeing some other things from us. We're working on the IDC6 and power supplies, so you'll see that coming soon. So again, previously, device information is entered by the FireCAD operator. The information's exported via spreadsheet, PDF, all kinds of ways people were doing that, and then entered manually into the Fire Panel Programmer. Now, we're eliminating all those steps. Now it's a direct import from FireCAD to bring that data over. This really kind of shows the simplicity of it, although we will get into the details, but you'll find in the latest release of FireCAD, there'll be an export Potter data, and you'll see in the Potter programming tool an option to import the FireCAD file. So they'll be going over those details as the presentation goes on. And one thing I want to point out before I hand it off, and I'll bring up this slide later if you're fumbling for your phone to kind of get this QR code, but there is a 25% off FireCAD license sale going on, and that offer is going to end on Friday night. So take advantage of that. I will bring up this slide again at the end if you aren't able to get this QR code real quickly, but that's something you should take advantage of. Now, in the Potter side on the programming tool, there's really nothing to buy there. As long as you get our latest upgrade of the tool, you'll have the capability. So really, that's the end here. I'm going to hand this off to Tony Conti and August Conti are going to do a demo on the FireCAD side, show you what has changed there, what you need to do to get this thing to be compatible with Potter. And then it's going to be picked up by Jacob Collier and Michael Arno to show you on the Potter side the import process. So I will hand it off right now, I believe, to August.
Thank you. I'm August Conti, and one of the part of the team that was responsible for developing FireCAD software. The major contributor to that effort is Anthony, who will also be giving you a little information regarding our the software. Our objective today with this presentation is to give you a high-level explanation of what FireCAD does. It's not intended to be an in-depth, boring, point-by-point illustration. We are available to do demonstrations and training, and we have a very robust program for that. So the one thing that you can be assured is that when you purchase FireCAD, or even when you get a free trial of FireCAD, you get our complete attention to make sure that you really understand all the things you need to understand in order to use FireCAD to produce a set of submittal drawings for a fire alarm system efficiently, quickly, and most important, accurately, without mistakes. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen and show you FireCAD. So I'm going to share an instance of FireCAD that we have already prepared so as not to take up a lot of time with the mundane details and to just show you the functionality of FireCAD. I will do this. And this is going to take maybe 15 minutes, and then I'll hand it over to Anthony, and he will explain a little bit more about getting the information from the FireCAD design drawing into the Potter programming software. So what I'm showing you here, I don't know if all of you who are watching are experienced with AutoCAD, but AutoCAD is the foundation of creating fire alarm system shop drawings in FireCAD. So in this instance, this is an instance of AutoCAD. AutoCAD is the main program used throughout the industry for creating fire alarm system shop drawings / submittal drawings / installation drawings. Those drawings are called by all those names, but in essence, it's the documentation that is required by NFPA 72 and therefore by your authorities having jurisdiction all over the country to be provided to them so that they can know that you are planning on installing a system that meets the code requirements. What I have here is a fictitious 3-story program. When you create a set of drawings, it's drawn in what is called the model space of AutoCAD. And then when you're done with the creation of the system drawings, they are printed out as PDF documents or as electronic PDF documents that are then submitted to the authority having jurisdiction, that being your fire marshal, fire department, building department, or whoever. So in this building, we're showing the first floor. It's a fictional building with way more elevators than are necessary for a three-story building, but it is fictional. This is the first floor of the building. Down here, up here, is the second floor of the building. And here is the third floor of the building. In the essence, in the interest of keeping this presentation simple, we have pre-populated icons that show the devices that are going to be used in this system. Now, we have in FireCAD what is called a ribbon, which is across the top of the drawing area, and it provides all the commands that you can use to do the job of drawing the fire alarm system out more quickly and more easily. In doing this, again, we need to have all the components of the fire alarm system shown on the drawing. Well, let's take a look at what we have here. The first thing I'm going to do is purge deleted entities and circuits, which gets rid of anything left over from previous operations. And then what I'm going to do is go over here to reports, and I'm going to create a device legend. And in creating the device legend, this is something required on the submittal. I have a lot of choices on what information I can include in the device legend. I'm just going to take the defaults that have been set up in this instance and show you what we have. So we have a Potter Pad 100 DIM 1, 57 Pad 300s with the 6-inch base. We have one heat and smoke detector, some generic non-branded water flow tamper switches, and 37 system sensor horn strobes. These are all depicted on the drawings. This is an example of an AutoCAD object which FireCAD recognizes. And if I select similar, it shows me where all these smoke detectors are. Now, what I don't have, and you may have noticed here, I don't have a control panel. So first thing I'm going to do is move over to the electric room on the first floor, and I'm going to choose a control panel. I'm going to type in the search box to find what I want. So I'm going to use an IPA 100 control panel. This is the AutoCAD symbol that represents that control panel. I'm going to place it in the electrical room on the wall. And then I'm going to type a name for that, P1. So we can identify it, especially when we have more than one panel. We could have a network system, or we could have a fire alarm panel and some power panels, some NAC panels. So each one is given a name, making them easier to identify. And now that I've got this panel on the drawing, it is provided with circuits. And if I look at this circuit, I can set active circuit from device, click on the panel, and find out that it has two NAC circuits named N1 and N2, and an SLC circuit named L1, along with the flex circuits that are there. I'm not going to use those. I'm going to use the SLC circuit. When I do that, my FireCAD palette, which is kind of our control center that tells us just about everything about our system, switches over to enable me to actually connect to the SLC devices that are compatible with the SLC circuit. They light up in green. You'll notice that these horn strobes don't light up in green because, as you all know, you can't connect a horn strobe to an SLC circuit. So in order to perform the connection of this SLC device to the SLC circuit, I simply left click, changing the shade of the green color, and left click over here, and left click over here, and then I can go up to this point, this point, this point, this point, this point, and so forth. Now, I'm not going to bore you by connecting everything on this system, but I'm only going to show you the procedure that is used and how simple and quick the procedure is in the ability to connect all of the SLC devices on this circuit or on this floor. And look at that. By connecting them, they now get addresses. So these addresses are the ones that are assigned to these devices. You, of course, control that. And when you make these connections, the attribute of the AutoCAD block displays the address. In this particular case, it includes the name of the panel and then the SLC circuit and the address, which is the address transmitted eventually to the panel programming software. So when I select this device, I then can right-click using an AutoCAD feature to select similar. And I can say, you know what? This is a little too much information. I don't want to display P1 because there's only one panel. So I go up to the attributes command and choose format device labels. Most of the FireCAD commands are logical. They're explained and named clearly and intuitively. The device name happens to be the panel name, and the card name is something we don't want. And we're not going to use branching here so far, but we haven't. So now the names are changed to L1 and detector number 19, address number 19. We started here with 4 and we ended up with 19. And if we look over here, our connected device list shows us that we have these 19 devices. So we have now made connections to the SLC devices. Now let me switch over and talk to you about the notification appliances. Here is a notification appliances. And as you can see, it is a 15 candela horn strobe. Now, we all know, and I think you probably all know, that you need to size the candela rating of the notification appliance to cover the area that it is located in. So in this case, I'm going to check that, and I'm going to show the coverage display. Well, unfortunately, 15 candela in this large area, open area, is not going to be sufficient. So we have a tool to change that candela setting. And from this list of the settings in the database that we're working with, we can increase that from 15 candela to, let's say, 75 candela. And now that we've done that, we can see that we have adequate coverage in this area. Now that we know we have adequate coverage, we hide the coverage display. So now we are ready to take step 2 of our process, and connect the notification appliances. I'm going to go back to the panel. I'm going to go to circuits. I'm going to choose the tool to set active circuit from device. And I'm going to click on here and I'm going to choose N1. Now over here on the left, the program has provided me a selection of P1 and 1. It now gives me the opportunity to do the same thing I did on the SLC circuit and start connecting these devices. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to connect these along this bottom wall, all of which haven't been changed from the 15 candela inadequate setting to the 75, but that's okay. I can come back and change those later. And then when I do that, I'm going to go around the perimeter of the building, and these might and might not be too many, but not to worry, because as soon as I right click and make that final connection, I look over here in this list, which is a real-time calculation of the load on that circuit. It tells me all the important information. It tells me of the 3 amp maximum capacity on that circuit, how much we're using. We're using 0.454 amps, only 15.13%. You are using the program, which gives you very accurate calculations, and you don't have to wait until you're all done. It also gives you the end-of-line circuit voltage using 2 methods of calculating, either the point-to-point method or the lump sum method. And this is a listing of what's connected to that circuit, just the same as I had the listing of when I was connecting the SLC circuit. So now that I have those connected, I can begin making reports. So I'm not going to make a lot of reports because, again, our objective here is just to show you how FireCAD functions and how it can speed up the time required. The traditional AutoCAD method of doing what I just did would take a couple of hours and would be subject to mistakes caused by just human error. So this is much quicker in getting your job done than any traditional method. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little tool that we added here, which is called Draw Circuit Wire Path or Draw Shared Wire Path. And when I click that command, it's going to follow the path of where I connected devices. And it's going to draw wireways following those connections. That wireway is provided with an abbreviation which tells you what kind of cable is used for that purpose. In order for me to show you what wires we're using, we'll generate a cable and wire legend. And that cable and wire legend tells us that we have 2 types of cable, 3 types actually. We have a 16-2 used for the SLC circuit, a 14-2 used for the NAC circuits, and for the IDC circuit, which is the connection between the monitor module and the water flow and tamper switches, we're using an 18-2. Any of these cables can be set to be whatever you want them to be. So we are now completed with connecting 1 floor of a 3-story building. Reports are instantly produced. For example, let me just generate a couple of reports and then I'll be done with this part of the presentation. I'm going to click on reports and I'm going to do a battery calculation. And this battery calculation format, by the way, can be saved so that you don't have to change the settings every time you make one. There's your battery calculation right here. And it gives you the alarm and standby requirements down here. I'm going to make another report, which is one of the most commonly used, the point-to-point voltage drop calculation, which I'm going to accept the format of and make that report. There is your point-to-point battery calculation using a 20.4 volt starting calculation and with an end-of-line value on the last device of 19.45 volts in this instance. We set a minimum of 16 volts so that you will get a warning if your NAC circuit exceeds that load and reduces the end-of-line voltage below 16 volts. The other thing that I'll show you, which is the last part of the many reports, is a riser diagram. And one of the most time-consuming tasks in creating a set of shop drawings is making a riser diagram and making sure that the content of the riser diagram matches the content of the floor plan and is accurately representing it. In this case, there's never a chance that you're not accurately representing on the riser diagram what's connected on the floor plan. So with that, you've seen the basic fundamentals of how FireCAD operates. Again, we have an open invitation to all of you for demonstration and or trial versions of the software. With this, I'll turn it over to Anthony, who will be able to take you a step further and show you how FireCAD can assist you in programming your Potter panel. Go ahead, Anthony.
Thank you again for that overview. My goal here in this step is to show you how to get all this information over to the Potter Fire Panel Programmer. As you can see, FireCAD during the design phase allows you to input a lot of information about these parts. Our database has the Potter library. We keep it up to date. But to assist the information and help populate your point list with information that you'd normally do by hand, we have a couple commands in FireCAD that you'll probably be using if you're using it on your designs. And one of those is beyond the circuit connection part of this process, we have a arbitrary entity property command that lets us add extra information to these devices, such as location. So if I'm going to attach information to this heat detector, smoke and heat detector, using FireCAD, I can put this information into the device and give some location names very easily. I'll do elevator lobby for these detectors. And I'll set a few more here just for our example. And that the entity properties dialog is something that we've had in FireCAD for a long time, but this information was normally used to export our device point list. We didn't have that interaction to export this data. But now that we do, if you're using the program, you're going to want to use location and set that property for the next step. And now that I do have locations set on our devices in that same floor plan that August was showing you, this information comes out in two ways. One is, and again, the previous way would be generating our device schedule, which of course includes that point list. And this was this would be the manual way of sending this to somebody and having them do the panel programmer. However, now with the new functionality, you'll see this export menu up at the top right of my screen. And I have a simple button here, export Potter data. And if you make the SLC connections. And if you set locations, you're able to export an FPCAD file, save that into your project folder. At this point, what you need to do is take the Potter Panel Programmer utility and simply import that file. And I'll hand this over to Jacob now, who will demonstrate that part of it.
Great, thanks, Anthony and August for that demonstration. Let me share this application here. All right, so what I'm sharing right now is something you may already be familiar with in the Fire Panel Programmer. Operation is going to be pretty similar here. We go to the File menu at the top, and there is a new menu entry for importing FireCAD files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that and choose the one that was exported by Tony. And first thing you'll see here is a dialog window that gives some kind of information for you if there are issues with any kind of formatting, or maybe there's an incorrect function set. Behind the scenes here, a lot's going on that you're not going to see in this demo for, time's sake, but anything that perhaps is incorrect will either be corrected with a default value, or in cases where we can't, intelligently choose a default value, we would skip the import for that specific point and continue on. Here, for example, you can see that there are two subpoints, point 2.1 and 2.2 in L1 of this panel. So you could always refer back to your FireCAD project to, nail these down. And it's just telling you right now that you have these 2 points set to the default function. And there's a note at the bottom saying, the import's going to proceed with these corrections made. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. And then it's going to, in the background, do a little quick configuration. And the big part here, and the majority of where we have focused our effort on for the first iteration, is going to be in point programming, as Bob pointed out at the beginning of his slide deck. So you will see that in point names, all these names have come in: stair one, electrical room, elevator lobby, things that was just demonstrated by Anthony. And you might say, okay, well, there's all this red stuff. What am I supposed to do with that? Well, the idea here is your next steps as far as configuring your panel program is going to be your zone programming. And that's kind of what these red things that are highlighting on every single function is going to tell you. Hey, this must be assigned to a zone. So you would go as you would for any other panel program. By default, you have your alarm zones, so you can add any number of zones you need to configure. I'm just going to do one for this demo. And in our window here, I'm just going to take a couple of these points, drag them into the zone programming, and then you will see that you have these that have gone from red to non-highlight, meaning that you have programmed those points. And that's kind of the overall process that I'm going to demo today. And then I will hand it back over to Bob Tata for a final little wrap up in his slide deck. And looking forward to hearing your feedback.
All right. Thank you, Jacob. So you got kind of an overview of the basics of doing the export out of FireCAD, the import into the Potter program. As we said, Tony and team have released a new version of FireCAD with this export, as well as Potter has also released a new version of the programming tool. So both of those are available. And really the next thing here, just want to kind of throw this out there. I mean, you can answer it today, or we'll be at NFPA, or you're always free to, give us a call. But, what is next? We see this as the beginning. not the end. Like I said, we met at NFPA and we had customer input, and we think we, have a nice first step. But we don't think it's the end. And if we get a lot of response and a lot of interest in this product, you're going to continue to see it expand. So definitely want to get your input on that. We do have the Q&A box is open. I mistakenly didn't point that out, but there's also the webinar chat. So feel free to send some questions in there, and we will answer questions as right now, and then any others we don't get to, we'll work on getting out a response to everyone. So if you do have any questions, let us know. Again, I'm going to put up the QR code for the FireCAD 25% off FireCAD license until Friday night. So please take advantage of that. But that is the end of our formal presentation. And again, open for any questions that you may have. So I do see a couple questions coming in. Plans to include other manufacturers. I probably can't answer that, but Tony, you may sometime in the future integrate with others.
I think that's a possibility right now. We don't have any other manufacturers to answer on, but currently Otter has been the first to be proactive. So I think that's definitely something that is a good thing here.
Yeah, I did see a question about it's kind of moving past my screen rather quickly about Potter and Inspect Point. The short answer there is there is some discussions going on with Potter and Inspect Point about sharing data. As you know, we have a product called IntelliView that it provides many services. It even does have a built-in test and inspection in there, but Inspect Point has a more complete solution than what we offer. They do many more detailed things that meet NFPA requirements, and so we are talking to them about having integration to IntelliView to allow them to be able to get points similar to like what we're doing here, and also to potentially get live events. So definitely give that feedback to Potter as well as Inspect Point, because your feedback is what kind of really energizes the development cycle.
I see a couple questions here I can answer pretty quickly in the Q&A.
Okay.
We've got a lot of questions in the webinar chat. Real easy one. Is FireCAD labeling limited to the number of characters available in the Potter software? And that is actually, FireCAD hasn't traditionally limited the characters for location, but the error checking is done on the import side. So Jacob showed a little bit about that. I think labels might be truncated when you import if the label's too long, so that it conforms to the panel programming software.
Yeah, that's correct, Tony. Didn't cover that, but that is the case. I don't believe you are limited in the FireCAD side, but for the Fire Panel Programmer, we would be truncating those to the limited 20 characters for like point labels, for example.
And Jacob, there's another question in there, I think really for you about those what happened with the import of the Potter programming and the two defaulted values. Were they excluded from the point list?
The two defaulted values, those got imported. They were just reset to like what would occur if you were to have those just added manually. So we have like the default value of say a like a PhD or a PD or a split detector would be like sensor only for the type. And you saw that in there. And that's what it would be set to for those. But they were imported, yes.
Yeah, and to follow up with that, in FireCAD, we have always had the part list integrated into our database, the full Potter catalog. What we've done is, on a designer's end, we are trying to preset those devices with a default function and type, and do that on a individual basis. So when you pick a part to use on the drawing, you get to pick, is that a split base? Is it a single base? And FireCAD allows you to do that. And then internally, where whatever specific part you pick has that setting. And of course, if we add a part and we don't set that function, those get filled in with the defaults so that we get the information in there. And then as we see that issue, we can make sure we update our database to make sure that every part has a function that's compatible by default. But the idea was to be as seamless as possible to everybody using FireCAD already and already doing Potter projects or updating existing ones, filling in that information so the export can get sent out. There's another question here. How does this get to our systems? This version, the latest version of FireCAD 2024 standalone or the latest AutoCAD plugin has this functionality already. So check for updates. And if you don't see the export menu, please email us and I will help get you the right version.
Tony, I see a question here might be answered between the two of us here. There's a question about can this be used to produce graphics for the Potter workstation? So our PotterNet does take graphic floor plans, and we do typically import DXFs and JPEGs and the like. And I don't know for sure. You might have to answer that for me. Like, can you export a DXF or another format that we could then import into our PotterNet?
Yeah, first of all, the platform being the standard in the industry, or even our standalone or the plugin, you have access. The drawing itself is where we're starting with and we're ending with an AutoCAD drawing with normal AutoCAD entities. The FireCAD part of it is a separate file. So the nice thing is, if that format is what's needed, you can certainly export DXF and a lot of other formats directly from the menu and make something that would work.
Yeah, yeah, that would work. So so the DXF files, which is what we usually prefer because it's vector based. Yeah, you could bring in that DXF from FireCAD and just that, and then so then you even have a more direct. You brought in all those points into our tool. Now the exact graphic that was used goes into our PotterNet. So yeah, that would work well.
I see a question about the training process, and that's what I do. It says for new FireCAD users, what's the training process and approximate time required to get a traditional AutoCAD designer to get up to speed with FireCAD? Well, of course, depends on your aptitude, but if you're an experienced AutoCAD designer, you're going to continue to use most of your AutoCAD skills. The only difference in when you're using FireCAD is the nature of the blocks that you're using to represent your system layout. None of that is going to change. So if you're an experienced AutoCAD user, you're going to know at least 50% of what you need to know. The only things that you will need to learn are going to be some of those specific FireCAD tools like making reports and riser diagrams and things like and setting candela ratings and things like that. So the time required for a good, solid AutoCAD user, I'm guessing you'll be comfortable with AutoCAD with FireCAD within a week.
So we have another question. If we have Potter designs that were previously created, can we incorporate this new point to those projects or does it have to be started new? I'll answer that one. You just have to, if you're using our database, our CADGen database that's online, you just update your project, open that old project, update the project. We add in the missing function point type information. And if you want to add location information to those parts with the entity properties dialog, that will fill in some location information that you can then export to the panel programmer file. So you can take older Potter designs that were done previously with FireCAD And you just have to update the database, the project database from our database online, and it will fill in that missing information. Another question, can you alter things in the FireCAD in the project device editor without having issues using this converter? Can you change wire and device symbols and not have any issues? That is accurate. Mike, you can. You don't have, it's, the devices have very specific settings built in.
There's a question about chart legend and calc fonts. Are they customizable in FireCAD? Yes. They are, they have the ability to be changed to whatever fonts are part of your AutoCAD system.
Does FireCAD have device details? We do not yet have device details. We do have a column in our database for device detail drawing files that we do plan to have fill in someday, but right now we all just collect our own details and keep those in our template drawing. Sean O'Leary, when do you estimate to have the Potter power supply information added to the export information added into FireCAD? That's a great question. I think I'll defer Jacob on that one. That's again probably a future addition to this tool, but I can't speak for a timeline on that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the feedback we're looking for is, we want this to be geared towards what makes your jobs more efficient. So if, that's the next step we take, that would be the next step we take. And, we'll plan it accordingly. I wouldn't say we're going to do it immediately, but, that is on the horizon. And we do know that we will be making continual updates to this feature, both on the FireCAD side and in the Potter programming tool, since there's like a dual little overlap there. And that's kind of where we would be as far as getting that added as a feature.
There's a question about what's the learning curve if you haven't had any experience with AutoCAD? And of course, that depends on the person who's learning. I have trained a lot of people that have never used AutoCAD. And in most cases, they've been successful. And here's the reason why. When you're using FireCAD within the AutoCAD environment to define a fire alarm system, you're only using about 2% of what AutoCAD can do. You're learning to move your mouse to zoom, pan, click, left click, right click, place devices. And so the learning curve for somebody who hasn't used AutoCAD is not really steep. It's a little more than if you do have AutoCAD experience, but don't let it intimidate you. We've got plenty of success stories of people who have learned to do what they need to do without having extensive AutoCAD experience or any AutoCAD experience at all.
Okay, I'll answer another question here about parts. Will the third-party Potter products be available in FireCAD, such as Eaton, Vocal, Two-Way? We're always adding parts. We have a lot of these parts in the database, in our project, in our parts database already. And just to let everybody know, we are dedicated to always adding parts. I try to add parts every single day, and we get a lot of requests for new equipment. All you have to do to have parts added to the system is send us an email at support@cadgen.com. And believe me, a lot of my day is spent adding parts, and we are getting others involved in adding parts. And that's how our database grows, and that's why it's about 14,000 parts right now and counting. So if there are any parts, any third-party Potter products we don't have in, please send them my way. We'll add them in. Then the data sheets, part numbers, whatever you have, and we will get them in our database so you can use them. Next question I see here. I noticed you did not label a floor. Can this label be appended with the floor level, or do you have to include the floor label for each device? We have our default properties, entity properties that we have in the drawing, in the project, in the program. Level is one of those, and floor is one of those options. However, location seems to be an all-in-one place that we gravitate towards. You can set a separate level on the devices as an entity property. And that is a separate column on our device schedule export. Right now, because of the character limitation, we're only using location for what we export to the panel Potter programmer. It's just if we append too much information, it'll be truncated anyway once it's imported. So you can label a floor, though, locally in FireCAD. This information will come out in our report on the drawing and in the riser if you do put it separately. The next question is kind of important. For those of you who have custom databases already, should we be using your database for this function, or will it work if we have a local? We need to make sure that the information about functions and points are merged into your local database. So if you've been using FireCAD for a while, prior to the last 3 or 4 months, we'll be able to integrate that into your database if you send us your local copy. We just need to make sure your Potter parts are set up with the same information, and then this function would work fine. It's since it's a newer function that we've added to do this, custom databases may not have that information, and we can help get it in your database. Do you have to add a location that is visible on the drawing for this programming? This is a good question. No, you don't have to leave location visible on the drawing. I think I saw this in the messages earlier. That is, we have plenty of ways to format the drawing to turn off those locations globally so they're not visible on the drawing. And you don't need to leave them visible. They're going to be sent out to that function whether they're visible or not. And the reason they're visible by default is so that if we are setting location on everything on a loop going around the drawing, we see them and we see that we set them. So then when we're all done setting all the locations and we generate our riser, we can turn them off. And locations will show up even if they're off. They'll show up on the device schedule, they'll show up in the reports, and they'll show up and they'll be sent through to the export function. That was a good question. Couple more questions I can answer real quick here in the Q&A. In FireCAD, can I change the device labeling for your SLC loop, or does it need to have specific settings in order to be converted properly? Right now in the current version with this tool, I've been asked about this, so I'll mention it, is that we have fixed the labels in FireCAD for the Potter devices to display with the subpoint turned on. And the reason for that was we wanted it to match exactly what you'd see when you open the panel programmer and see that point list and see the subpoints, even if there's only one subpoint. I am re-enabling the ability for you to turn off that subpoint. You won't be able to format it without sub addressing, but the extra subpoint, it has been a request after this update to be able to turn that off. So the addresses would still be synchronized, the synchronized address on a dual module or a dual point device. Visibly, though, you'll be able to turn off that extra subpoint in the next little update we have planned, so that you don't have to see it on the drawing, but yet your address will still synchronize. It will still be the right address when you get it in the panel programmer. Okay, so I got another one about the location. Yes, you can turn off the location text at the device. You don't need to leave it shown on the floor plan. David, thank you. I know you've been waiting for AutoCAD Express tools. And yes, we're working on the 2026 version of FireCAD. And in that version, we're making sure we enable Express tools. That's been a long-standing request for us. Where do you turn off location text? That is on the attributes ribbon. And there is a tool up there that says set property visibility. If you click that, there's a dialog and you can scroll all the way to the bottom and uncheck the property visibility for location. That'll globally turn off location on the floor plan.
Okay, Tony, I think we're kind of pushing up against the top of the hour, so we've probably worn you out too. So thank you for that. But we appreciate all the interest today in the webinar. Certainly, the FireCAD people are available for additional questions, as well as Potter. So feel free to contact us directly with any questions. Like I said, we're looking for the next new feature for this integration, and we really welcome your feedback on that. So again, thank you for your time today. Thank you for the FireCAD team, and everybody, please take advantage of the great sale that they have there. And we'll be talking to you when you call in. So thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for
Thank you.
joining.
Thanks.